Yeah, or I mean, it's a Wednesday, just so it's not a Monday, so that.
Hello, everyone. A couple others signing in, and then we can get started. So, just like 3 minutes ago, it looked like nobody was coming. So, I'm glad you guys are here. Yeah, last minute, my whole life works. So I have a little presentation, and then we'll take plenty of time for you to ask questions. There'll be public testimony at town halls, but we're completely open to anything you want to ask. When you ask questions, I actually like for it to be a question and not a dissertation about how you were born a poor white child somewhere far away a long time ago. But if you can get us to that point, it'd be really nice to exchange that information, whatever we can answer tonight. If you sign in and you're interested in answers that maybe we can't give you tonight because we don't have the information to get it to you, but I'd like to just have a back and forth. I actually like kind of a circular thing, but there's too many folks for that. We'll go through the presentation and then get to the questions and see the best way to have that discussion. I have a friend here that surprised me. When I was Senate President, the minority leader was Tom Begich, and we had a very healthy relationship. He's here tonight, visiting Seward today, and it's really good to see him. We actually went on a little bit of a tour nationally on how folks can get things done that agree on a lot of things that really matter and disagree on a few things. And part of our little deal was a little silly skit about abortion, and we said, guess what? We don't do that. He knows how I feel, I know how he feels, and we're focused on growing the state and solving problems, and that's why we focus on the things that matter to every Alaskan. We got a lot of work done together. Good friend, we visited almost every day. Yeah. And we had, like you do in any caucus, we had crazy people in both caucuses, and we got a lot of work done. That's a very successful session, and I always appreciate our relationship.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, good to have you here. We have your assembly member here, Ms. Eklund is here, and the mayor is here. Everyone's equally important. I just point that out because they've actually signed on to representing you. We're all
Peter?
saying, yes?
Could you speak up just a bit, since you don't have a mic? People are having trouble hearing.
Yes.
Rhonda's gonna see if she can go get a microphone too.
Okay.
Thank you.
But I have a pretty good outside
Yeah,
voice,
we need
so
your
we'll
outside
use it.
voice.
Okay. Okay, so anything you want me to repeat, because you missed some really good stuff.
What? No.
Okay.
it's okay.
I'm gonna go through this, and then we'll go to questions. If you can't hear me while I'm talking through it, I'll back up and say it again. So just fun stuff about Kenai. There are 10 states that are smaller. It's 24,000 square miles. A good proportion of our property and some of the most probably future valuable properties on the west side of the inlet. And of course, you know what the rest of it looks like. Really happy to be here on the east side tonight. This is our org chart. I've looked through since we became a borough, I don't know, 63 years ago. And it's the first time that an org chart has the citizens at the top of the chart. We literally have no reason to exist if it wasn't for you. You have everything that we deliver, you have asked for. We're a second-class borough, which means when you wanted a service area or you wanted road service, you put it on the ballot, you voted for it, it passed, and that's why we're doing that thing, right? right? So we're pretty lean and mean, you know what we do for a living. 64, we have an elected mayor, 9-member assembly. Population now is 62,000, slightly over right now. We just do the basics. What came with the mandatory Borough Act was taxation, education, and planning. You've asked us to add solid waste, 911, emergency management, senior and post-secondary funding. We have the service areas such as the 2 hospitals, South Peninsula Hospital and CPH, Central Peninsula Hospital. Fire and EMS, road service, recreation service areas. We have 2, one in Nikiski, one in Seldovia, senior service areas. We have 1, which is Nikiski. Of course, we have the senior grant program. I saw our director here. And then we have ports and harbors, tourism promotion, utility assessment areas if you're doing a USAT or something like that. So those are the powers you have given us. We have wisely resisted others. Those are the unsustainable costs that are very difficult to manage. And as we talk through budgeting, you'll understand why we, with discipline, will continue to have a manageable budget for the long term. So 651 miles of maintained roads. Those are the roads that were built to borough standards. If you want to have a maintained road today, you have to build it to a borough standard, and then you can be included in borough maintenance if you're not already in it. 44 schools is now down to 43. 8 landfills, 13 transfer sites. So we, not everybody that was employed at the borough when I got there is there any longer. The folks that chose to not put the public first, some of them we gave a very nice letter for them to use for their next job about the things they do well. A couple didn't get a very nice letter, but we've been pretty successful on putting a very strong team together that's doing a very good job for you. There are a lot of very positive comments when people come in, sometimes very upset about things. I think it's going pretty well at the borough. We have a great team. We are essentially philosophies. We work for you. We report directly to you. Our goal is to give you the best possible service at the lowest possible cost. We are at a CPI-based budget. We've been successful for the last 4 years, if you will. 2.5% max, right around the 20-year for CPI, if you will. If we can beat it in some years, it makes it easier to manage years when inflation is higher. We had an 8% year 2 years ago, and that philosophy has worked on bridging those tough spike years with lower years. We want to protect you from unsustainable increases. You know, you got an almost full mill reduction last year. You had your 75K increase from the 50K on your residential. That's not a populism thing. That's trying to let you know that we're watching every penny that we spend on services. We have no desire to turn into what it's like in other places. And we're also fully cognizant that state law required a 34% increase in your assessments over 3 years. We're trying to counter that so that you have that 2.5% thing to work with over time as well, whether you're on a fixed income or things are tight, hardworking family. We want you to know what your costs are going to look like in borough taxes for the long term. And then we'll talk about education funding for an entire section of this. So we do have low taxes here. And we're losing families like water. We're gaining 550 to 600 seniors a year. And we're losing 2 to 17-year-olds, and they're taking their parents with them at an unprecedented amount. That's not a healthy sign. Alaska having 14 years of out-migration is a very unhealthy sign. But we have a lot of work to do. We're trying to do our part, keep families here, keep a healthy workforce, stronger local economy, and supporting strong schools, and hopefully we bring our kids back for being the next generation leaders. This is last year's budget. 180 in revenue, 184 in expenditures. The 4.3 was the funding to the cap on education, or would have been balanced. One-timer they asked for, one-timer that they got, and I've seen comments online. I understand how politics works, could have limited that increase. We agreed to 1 year. It's not something that's affordable mathematically, and you'll see why that is in just a few slides. Last year, funding to the cap was $62 million, but we spent 73 on education. And we spent another $1 million on chaplain schools, where kids were getting dropped off on the Sterling Highway in the middle of winter, on the curve, on a hill. So we bought the lot next door, developed it into a place for parent drop-off. We are going to spend money where we need to keep kids safe, and we spent a lot of money on education. So, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Essentially, the goal is, like I said, where you know what this is going to look like for the long term, where you don't get the big changes in mill rates and the big changes in assessment. I'm gonna talk about a bill that's before the legislature right now, that I'm hoping does pass on a 5% max increase in assessments every year. That would be your full and true value. We'll talk about the value of that in a little bit. So our goal during COVID, the borough, long before I got here, received a whole bunch of money, and they got way out of compliance. So we're supposed to be, I don't have a pointer, we're supposed to be between the blue and pink area of those boxes according to our ordinance structure. That keeps us collecting an incline that is manageable over time, so that you know where that is going to be. They over-collected and kept it. And this budget is going to get us in compliance in the 3 years that's required to. So we are purposely bringing that angle down. The borough has kept, I don't know, $20 million of taxpayer money above the ordinance structure that they passed, that they've maintained through the years. It's your money, doesn't belong to the government. You could be using it on fixing your car, adding to your house, adding to your business. We're going to get back into compliance, and you can decide what you want to do with it. So that's, again, not a populist thing. It is literally our ordinance structure. It is the law. So we're going to get back there and try to maintain that curve over. The bond projects, 65 plus million, I'm gonna just talk about the status of where we are on those. One of the first projects was the Seward track and field, was completed in spring of 2025. That was the first event, so ribbon cutting. Kenai Central High School restrooms, concession, and storage facilities complete. Chapman Elementary School parent-student drop-off is complete. What was funded with the bond was $487,000. We spent, and thank you for your support, Cindy, we spent almost $1 million on acquiring the piece of property next door and putting a little parking area in, which I think it was a matter of time before there was a loss of life. Dropping your kids off on a 55-mile-an-hour highway on a hill in the winter, in the dark, was unacceptable. Homer High School front entrance is complete. Hope School roof is gonna be completed, or was completed in the spring of 25. Soldotna High School siding is half complete. That project is completed at the back side. We got a grant for completing this on time from HEED, so they'll complete the second half of that siding project. That's the phase 2. Kenai Middle School security is in process. North Star Elementary roof, Mountain View Elementary, $10 million project, in process, hoping to be completed by sometime this spring. Parent-student drop-offs are increasingly important, especially in areas like Homer Middle School is another problematic highway drop-off. It's built in a really terrible place with no land nearby, so the planning is very difficult on what we're going to do there. But we are going to improve on-site and look for, in fact, that's the Homer, did you take that photo, Trent? That's the Homer drop-off?
Yeah.
By the way, Joe Rizzo is in my office, Dana Canna was in my office as well. You, when you call our office, typically get one of them. If you need me, you'll get me, but they're very talented and attentive. This was the tough one. The bond, we inherited a bond that was inadequately funded by about $15 million. We're not rebuilding the school, we are actually rebuilding the prep school, which is an 84,000 square foot school that's in very good shape, that needs to be adapted for an elementary school, and it's going to be helping with the consolidation efforts. Talk about that in a little while. Of the big 5 school districts in the state, there's been 20 schools closed or about to be closed. I know some folks don't like that, but that's the reality. We're missing 3,500 kids. Preference is putting money into programs and not buildings. We want our kids to have the teachers they need, the services they need to be successful. So, instead of rebuilding that school, this is the school that's being built as an elementary school, and it will have room for consolidation from schools that are near crumbling stage. And I already talked about the leftover. We are not rebuilding the maintenance shop. That may be something that we look at if there are remaining funds after Nikiski track and field is completed and we nix the admin move. We need to spend money on kids and not moving administration around. We have plenty of room in the borough building to share with the administration. So I think there were relationship problems with the last administration and the district, and they never wanted to see each other again. We don't have that problem anymore, so we have plenty of room. School funding. So we are actively involved. We were on the override of the governor's veto. Mike can personally claim 6 votes. It would not have passed had we dropped even 2 of them. The bottom line is this: the state of Alaska has a constitutional requirement to fund education, maintain public education. We have a statutory minimum and maximum. Constitutional law is a stronger body of law than statutory law. And you'll see why we've been keeping up and will continue to keep up. And the state does not have an inflationary correction, which has been extremely problematic. So I'm tired of this fight, and it's gotta end. So we'll see who's the next in the governor's seat. Overriding that vote, that veto, that was a ridiculous veto. Now, had the rest of the budget been managed that way, we wouldn't have funding problems in the state. But the bottom line is, every other department had increased with that thief in the night called inflation in mind, and one stayed flat. And that doesn't work. It doesn't work anywhere. It doesn't work in your homes. I don't know, maybe you find the groceries at the same price they were 5 years ago, or fuel, or utilities. You're supposed to laugh at that. Inflation's a real thing, and I call it a thief in the night because it's just always there, you never see it. But responsible budgeting includes inflationary adjustments. Ours does. It's still tight, but we still make it work. You can't keep something flat for 10 years and expect it to continue functioning. Conservative guy looks at every penny. The bottom line, these things cost money. And they cost about 2% more every year. So you have to adjust for that in order for things to keep functioning. In our case, The BSA was an issue, but missing 3,500 kids is a really big deal. So we have a lot of work to do. Other things we're working on, we just passed resolution 2026-017. We are working with legislators for Senate Bill 259, was dropped by Senator Bjorkman. Had we started this process some time ago, when I started undertaking it, we would have saved about $4 million for the KPB this year. Sometimes things are not the way they seem. The base student allocation is very complicated. I think we have a slide on that, right? After this one. So I won't completely talk about that. But we did pass it, and there is a bill on that now. That means a lot. Not only does it cap your assessment increases to 5% a year, it stops the state shift to you. And this year alone, it's close to $4 million of what the state paid under the BSA shifted to what you have to pay in your property taxes. So we have two kinds of things that support education here. We have 3% of every sale goes to education. We have an education tax here in the Kenai Peninsula Borough, and then a growing proportion of your property taxes are going to meet that need as well. So, what else? We also had a seasonal sales tax that we were exploring. That would have increased school funding by about $4.5 million a year. Those two numbers really matter, because had individuals that are not inclined to dig into the depths of the mathematical impacts on different decisions, had understood what we were trying to do. $4 million from the cap and $4.5 million from the seasonal sales tax happens to be exactly what school funding's gap is this year. So hopefully we'll build some more trust over time. And Cindy, I do appreciate your vote on the 5% thing this year very much. But the BSA is unreasonably complicated and very broken. And assessing escalations have proven how broken it really is. Other things we're working on is the BSA, okay? So when they encouraged us to build 44 schools, they said, we're gonna give you school bond debt reimbursement, and they said there'll be plenty of maintenance dollars and capital dollars to maintain those schools. And by the way, when we do required exemptions on property taxes, we're gonna reimburse you for those. None of those things exist anymore. But if we choose to close the school, they penalize us for it. Get penalized after the third year. They should be rewarding us for covering our costs, not penalizing us, because they backed off on their deals. Maybe they can readjust ours. And the 7-year thing is absurd. So you can reopen a school anytime you want to, but there's a penalty for what they gave you in holding you harmless for 3 years that you have to pay back. That doesn't make sense, because we're all struggling at education funding, so the state should not be penalizing us. They should be meeting their requirements as well. KPB supported education, that the all-in was $10 million above the cap last year, so it wasn't the 62, it was 73. If you add the Chapman project, it was $74 million. When you go back to the slide of what we have for revenue, cap. It's big cost. It is our #1 priority. So you can call me and say you don't care about kids in schools. And then you can look at our budget that demonstrates our values. I can't remember which Democrat I heard that from on the Senate floor. He might be standing here.
No, Bill Willikowski.
Willikowski. W. But we demonstrate our values by that proportion of pie that you see up there. We put education first, but we can't sink the Berlin anytime. It has to be a part of the overall model. If you look at the 6th borough or bullet down, currently meeting with legislative leaders with a plan to stop this unnecessary manual battle. We can't do this anymore. We can't hang on to teachers. Some families are leaving because of the struggle with education year after year after year. year. There's two things they fight about Juneau every year, we fought about Juneau every year, education funding and the gift. Both things need to be cleared up so we can move on and start solving problems that have been plaguing our state, which have resulted in almost 14 years of outmigration. Because people don't think that we can grow up as a state and solve problems that a lot of other states have solved, most states have solved, right? We're a relatively infant state, but it's not an excuse for not moving past these every year struggle. Education. And then we worked together on passing the READS Act, the Alaska READS Act. We spent a lot of time with two states, Mississippi and Florida, that were camped with us down at the bottom for a very long time. Now I think they're like number 8 and 13 in a relatively short time. And we borrowed a lot of their tactics, had a lot of their experts talking to us. Tom worked very hard on that. We got that bill passed. And even the skeptics, Clayton sat down with me, our superintendent, Tom, if you haven't met Clayton yet, sat down and said, I was mad at you guys when you passed that thing, but damn it, it's making a difference.
Yeah.
First year made a huge difference in the KPBSD. Second year has made a significant difference as well. Need to read to learn. Black leadership is failing to solve Alaska's problems. In this case, giving Alaska's sustainable education funding and delivering improved outcomes is hurting kids and challenging communities and building. We all see it. I was just talking to your school board member, going, wow, my just great school board member. We were talking about some of the challenges this year. Year after year, when teachers don't know if they're gonna have a job, they're gonna look elsewhere. And only the most dedicated and those that probably don't have the options to go elsewhere end up being the ones that remain. Your best teachers that have some flexibility in their lives, eventually they want to keep teaching. If this continues, we had to do a rehire bill for teachers because we can't fill the positions. We are bringing people in from other countries to fill teaching positions. And that's from our inability to solve these, in my view, relatively simple problems. So the Senate Bill 259, why 5% capping matters, it slows the shift from state funding to local property tax funding. That escalation, the more rapidly it occurs, the less money comes from the state, and I'll show you what that minimum basic need looks like. It's shifting relatively rapidly. It started 2 years ago. It's a problem. So if they accepted our 5% maximum escalation as full and true value, that would be our full and true value. It also makes it a lot more manageable and a much smoother curve on you paying your property taxes. And allows us to keep mill rates steady as well, instead of playing this little mill rate property tax, assessment increase, mill rate decrease. It just gets really jagged and hard to follow. We want you to have faith in what that curve looks like and the discipline it takes to stay on a 2.5% curve over time. It's important, every category, every line of spend, just so you know that every one of your dollars is being accounted for and taken very seriously. So, bottom line is us, red. We increased 2.5% a year. Last year, we funded to the gap for the first time in 20 years. There was a reason for that. We're going through a struggle right now with this AKLNG thing about governor's bill that would reduce the property taxes on that by 90%. So we've been meeting with the mayors along the way the whole time. I talked to Dreyer about, do you get pressure to fund to the gap? He said, no. It's easier for a Democrat to tell people that we can't afford to fund to the gap. It's just easier. The Republicans are just, and I don't care what party you are, I'm not a big partisan guy. Bottom line is, we can't afford to fund to the gap. That escalation is so incredibly rapid that second-class boroughs don't have the funding resources to do that. Easier for first-class boroughs, very difficult for second-class boroughs. But we have kept up with inflation for decades, while the state continues to decline. So what we will receive from the state this year is going to be, well, you can see it declining, $66 million range. It should be around 88. If they were doing what we do and kept up with inflation and the amount that we increase every year. So we're keeping up with that line. We're dang close to that line. And what the struggle is on funding to the cap is, the way I describe it is this. We could fund at the minimum, and that looks like this. So for FY '27, we could fund at $39 million. What's going to be in the budget is $59 million. So this would be funding to the minimum. We're funding at $59 million, and the difference on funding to the cap is a few $1 million on the outside end that makes it very difficult to maintain a curve, an affordability curve for you, the taxpayers. So that piece is the piece that the state needs to catch up on. That inflationary piece, that gap, that growing gap, is that delta between what we're paying. So you can see what happens without a 5% cap. FY '26, minimum contribution, $35 million. State contribution, $76.2 million. FY '27, this year, $72 million. We've lost $4 million on state funding. What they don't pay for, we have to make up, or cut our costs, which I do support. There's always room. We've been able to maintain the borough with different factors that impact education, no doubt. If that drops down to 69, that's a $10 million drop in 3 years from the state. So if the BSA is broken, no inflationary correction, then as assessments increase, the state share of the funding drops substantially, an amount that would be very difficult for us to make up here locally. I'm gonna back up a slide. This is very important. It's all important. In the last 7 years, we have only missed funding to the cap by 2% or $20 million. The Kenai Peninsula Borough has only missed funding to the cap, all with our all-in, by 2% or $20 million. The Matsu has missed funding to the cap, another second, I'm comparing us to second-class boroughs, has missed funding to the cap by 8%, $152 million. I'm doing the percentage, so you know it's percentage is apples to apples, the dollar amount isn't their larger. But 8%, and Fairbanks has missed funding to the cap by 9%. So we really are doing the best we can. Battle cry should stop being funding to the cap. We're saying nasty things on Facebook if you don't fund to the cap. It should be, help us get this fixed, so we don't have this stupid battle every stinking year on adequately funding education. It should at least be considered the same as all of the other state agencies, and it's not. It's a philosophical battle, and it's not fair to kids. We can't keep up locally. So, this is the mix. The blue is property tax supporting, which is getting close to half now. If you saw in the early days, the 3% sales tax was covering the vast majority. That proportion will grow every year. Like I said, we did have a seasonal sales tax that I'd still like to send to the voters. It's a 4% summer, 2% winter. If you evaluate, went through with the tourism working group, Cindy was there for most of those meetings. We thought that we subsidized tourism, and then we ran the models of what tourism brings in various taxes against what they use in services, and the reality of it is on a 4-to-1, they subsidize us. That's good, that's good. A good commerce thing, whether you like tourism or hate it, go to a seasonal sales tax like they have in several places around the state, Pennsylvania. for the 3 months of the summer, or 6 months of the, from April until September would be 4%. The winter would be 2%. If you, so when I first started looking at this, I thought, there's no way I wanna do this. I'm really active in the summer. I spend a lot more money in the summer. Until I started actually going through my bills and looking at holidays and utility bills and those kinds of things. We do construction projects, but we have a $500 cap that still hits you. The bottom line is it's all those people from somewhere else that spend a whole bunch of money here in the summer. Seasonal sales tax at a minimum would earn us about $4.5 million. Remember, that's school money. Sales tax is all school money. We don't use sales tax dollars for something else. So we may bring that up. We'll see if we have folks that poison it immediately by not understanding the math or the facts. Because that could kill it. We have this thing called Facebook now, and I know that's where I get all my facts. I'm sure you do as well, but it can really do damage when people don't take the time to really evaluate each issue, right? They get programmed, they're allowing themselves to be programmed by their phone and by their lights, and that's just how our world works, so. Anyway, that just demonstrates the shrinking state contribution, the increasing local contributions. The fascinating thing about this, we crossed over last year slightly, but by FY28, we absolutely will be spending more on education every year afterward than the state does. The folks with the constitutional requirement will be spending less and less of the proportion of funding education, and the folks with only a statutory minimum requirement will be spending more and more just to even have functional schools. So we can have those discussions about outcomes. I'll agree with a lot of you. We are struggling on outcomes. A lot of reasons for that. I think we need a Alaska Math Act to go with the Alaska Reads Act, borrowing from the best-in-class states that have really turned things around. I think we have some things that we have to improve. But if you separate the outcome from the actual business of education, everything about the buildings and the labor and the utilities and the maintenance has increased. You have to keep up with that. In any business model, you have to keep up with the business of it, and then we should work really hard on the outcomes. We proved it can be done in one particular subject. I think the eventual outcome from the Alaska Reads Act result will hopefully benefit every aspect and every subject in education. So I get that. I mean, people want to argue about we have the worst outcomes, we should choke them out. And I say, okay, let's divide the problem. You gotta support the buildings so they exist and they're safe and they're heated and they're functional. You gotta have teachers. Now let's talk about a way to get the other subject improved as well. They are two different subjects that seem to be married in the way some people look at it. I think you have to look at it both ways. Land management, we have a April 25th land sale. We're having 2 a year. For the first time ever, we have a comprehensive plan on borough-owned lands. Try to categorize them for residential, long-term retention, industrial, commercial, and get them out of the market. We're not a forever land bank. We will retain an adequate proportion of acreage, but we want to get it out there. Every sale now is with a paddle. The reason I focused on a comprehensive land plan is we're a young borough, and land has been sold irresponsibly in the past, and it should be a very transparent, no special deals thing. We don't do special deals. We do, everybody has the right to own cattle. We've had some borough where we try our best to stretch challenges on borough property owners or borough citizens having the first chance to purchase properties. We have a land affordability program. And our last general sale, which was our first sale that had the LAP program in it, we sold 5 lots under the general land sale. That essentially gives you a discount that qualifies for a construction loan. We're really focused on housing and getting residential properties on the market, so that could be available for additional housing. But all takes time, but we're doing well. We're gonna see how the LAP programs work on whether or not we incentivize building earlier, a little bit more handsomely, so that it could result in the 2 challenging areas in the borough for housing, which is your area and Homer. In FY '23, Homer became the most expensive place in the state of Alaska to live on a per unit basis. And it's all about people from somewhere else coming up for the summer, falling in love, and thinking an $800,000 home's a bargain. You get that over here as well. So it's a supply and demand issue, but we're gonna do what we can to give the edge to local residents from borough land sales. Oh, let's see, we have a functioning baler at the CPL now. We're back to recycling everything we were, other than plastics. Plastics don't work. Low value plastics don't work at all. You create more greenhouse gases shipping low value plastics to the lower 48 for processing than you do burying them in the ground. 1s, 2s, and 5s, we're working with Alaska Plastics Recycling, Plastics Recovery. We will collect for them and help them store if they are actually responsible in picking them up. We will put community members together that want to help on shredding those plastics and putting them into super sacks so they can haul them off. But we can't make it work on moving those plastics outside. Our focus is recycling in state, which is why cardboard is back. And if we get Alaska plastics recovery to be reliable, and I'll buy another green plastic picnic table if he can get them out to market. But it's been tough for him, and I get it. It's pretty energy intensive. But we've added tin, and essentially all of the recycling occurs at Seward, Homer, and Central Peninsula landfill. A lot of the problems we had before is when we had recycling at the remote sites, almost every load was contaminated, and you can't move contaminated materials. So we're asking people to bring them in. We may, once we get at full production, we may experiment with some different containers and cameras and find people that are putting fish, dead dogs in with paper and cardboard, which is just a continuous problem. So end up having a lot of cost on collecting it, and then the whole thing goes in the landfill because of a lot of fish waste in the summer and things like that. So we may pick a pilot project, Cooper Landing, and see if we can control it with cameras and a few hefty fines, which we're not big on the heavy hand thing, but on some of it, it just penalizes everyone else if you don't have a method of improving that behavior. We processed 70 of the 75,000, 13,000 brand new, exemptions, 2,000 brand new ones. We still have people that like paper, and we had, of the ones that didn't go online, we had 3,500 calls and walk-ins. We had several notices. Who didn't apply for their 75K? What?
Missed it.
No, that's impossible. We came to your door 4 times. Sir, you haven't filed yet.
Missed it.
All right, you'll get it next year. I thought you were gonna say something really honorable, like you wanted it to stay in the budget.
I do.
Thanks for being honest. Anyway, again, the we're trying to counter the rapid escalation and stay within our curve. So So when your curve goes above our curve, it's out of balance. I personally think that balance is pretty important. And a lot of engagement, as you know, I was in the LNG business for 40 years, sold to 2 of those countries, still know a lot of them, we've been meeting with a lot of them. I do not support the governor's deal. I'm gonna say the governor's deal, it's not his deal, it's the company's deal. I don't support it. We don't need to get rich on Alaska, aka LNG. Certainly don't need working families and senior citizens subsidizing a large project. So, I gave them some ideas. I've been on all sides of that table, I've negotiated a lot of community deals. Started a lot earlier. They talked about a need for property tax relief in July, and the first meeting was literally as legislators were driving to Juneau, and I'm not gonna do the pressure thing. I don't think the legislature's gonna move a bill. I don't know your feel, Tom.
No, that's absolutely right. You're not.
Until we come to agreement. I'm fair, we actually do a thing with the industrial facilities in Nikiski when they are not in production, we reduce their property taxes significantly, we have that right under Title 29. The governor's bill is trying to take that right away from local communities. This one is just for AKLNG, but then every project after that would have us subsidizing other projects, and that's unacceptable. That's our right. We know what our needs are. We're not trying to get rich off of it, but we absolutely have to cover our costs, and the cost will be substantial. According to their own worksheet that the project put out, pre-operation, our costs are $13 million a year. That's a lot of money, and that has to be covered by the project. Once they're under operation, then it should be somewhat lucrative on covering our costs and making sure that they're investing in our community. But what we do now is when Agrium shut down, they're shut down, they're not making any money. We wanna reduce their holding cost to something reasonable so that someone hopefully comes in and reuses that site, which would be beneficial for jobs and for.
So that's not fully just decommissioned, that can be started up again?
Needs some work, it's been a while. But the Kenai LNG facility that I ran for years is now a proposed import terminal for an interim supply of natural gas, and had that been fully taxed, that facility likely would have gone away and made it a very challenging greenfield site. So we want to work with people, we want those assets to stay and hopefully be potential commerce for the future, and that's what we would do with this project. When they're building, they don't need to make money on a property tax. I'm willing to negotiate. Their throughput idea was my idea because I've done that in other deals. The more gas you move, the more costs we're going to have and the higher your tax is. But it's more of a pill than a property tax, and that's fine. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat that's fair to a community, but a 90% drop in property taxes that also doesn't pay sales tax and doesn't have adequate escalation has us underwater in a very short period of time, and that's unacceptable. So, I talked about the team. I'm really proud of our team. That's funny, I'm wearing the blue jacket and like, this lives in my truck pretty much, so. But we have a great team. We have, it's amazing how many 25-year pins we give. Those folks span a lot of administrations because they're really good at what they do. They understand their job to deal with the public. I have had to let very few people go, and have hired some really top-notch folks. I'm really excited about who we have in the building. And I hear that from people every day. We're doing the annual survey that'll be coming out in the next month, and we watch those numbers from when we first started after the special election when I became mayor that first spring to now, and the numbers have improved pretty dramatically. People understand that we work for you, and I really appreciate that. That's all I have, so I'm ready for questions. Yes, sir.
Since
since you picked on me. We're talking about cost shifting from the borough to the state regarding schools. You know, as a PTA president, I care about schools. I feel like whether the state increases their funding to our schools, our taxes have to go up. Whether the borough increases funding, our taxes.
Why do you say that? What state taxes do you pay?
I
Unless
just-
you smoke and drink a lot.
I just spent the last 2 days in legislators' offices, 20 offices in the last 2 days. They seem to think that the budget's tight, that a lot of the spending has already been spent by Dunleavy by approving stuff that he. But whatever the case, I mean, money doesn't just come from anywhere. If the state is going to fund our schools more, somehow us citizens have to pay for it. And if the borough has to pay for it, somehow it comes out of our pocket. So to me, it feels like a blame game. Like, why? Help me understand why it would be somehow better for the state to pay for our schools rather than the borough. To me, it's like, well, it's gonna come out of my pocket either way.
Yeah, that's a misconception that you have. Rebalancing the state budget for critical services that have been neglected for years doesn't necessarily require additional revenue that's gonna result in a tax shift. Every penny we spend as a borough comes out of your pocket. Education is one of their primary constitutional responsibilities. It's not ours. So the legislature wrote some statute that said that about a third of the geographic area of the state, the locals are gonna have to pay for it. 2/3 of it, your schools are free. REAA areas. The population base is paid for school, the rest of the state doesn't. But the bottom line is, it's time to grow up. So I had an all-in plan that some of us supported. And no support from the governor, even though he dropped a plan this year that sounds amazingly similar to my all-in plan, although he got the oil tax thing wrong and a couple other things. The gap is tiny compared to anywhere else on straightening out our problems. You just have to make decisions, and you have to have leadership from the top that's willing to support leadership from the legislative branch. Had I had support from the top, they wouldn't even talk about it at the time. It was a low and broad sales tax. It was industry giving some, all industry giving some. It was a new PFD calculation that increased, escalated over time. So people knew what they were getting, knew what they were going to be getting, instead of having no idea if there's a PFD or not. We have $87 billion in savings. We have the pieces to make it work. And in fact, the sales tax was low, broad, and temporary. Because on a 2% sales and service tax, within 5 years, the numbers work, and you would have an adequate amount in your permanent fund for a POMV to pay the bills, likely in perpetuity unless Armageddon hit. So your property tax is a direct check of you to the borough. And you're covering all of it. Either way, the state share has to be solved. We don't mind doing our share. As you saw, we're covering a lot higher proportion than any other second-class borough. But that part is just a fairness issue. It's a laziness issue. It's an unwilling to make tough decisions and grow up issue. And our state is dying because of it. So it has to be figured out. If we paid to the cap every year, within 2 years, there would be no way for us to keep going. I don't mean that we couldn't squeeze people enough to pay those taxes, although I wouldn't be in office anymore, because if you think that that's the way people in this borough vote, you're incorrect. I wouldn't be here, but if someone else wanted to try to force the funding to the gap. We still wouldn't have enough to fund education within 2 years. You saw the crossover. It drops off so precipitously because of how broken the BSA is. The BSA has to be funded. So there's not enough money in the system until we solve those problems. They have to be solved. Okay, young lady in the back.
I get that it's a problem that needs to be fixed at the state level. I understand that, but my kids are in school right now. And you have the $8 million right now to fix the problem that we face for next year.
I don't understand the question.
Why spend money?
Pardon?
Why
No,
don't
I didn't ask you. I asked her.
I think Dave understands what I'm asking. Like, why not we look towards the future, but also fix what we can right now for right now?
We may fix more, but so you weren't here. 20 schools have been closed in the Big Five, or about to be closed in the Big Five. The average savings ends up being $1.5 million a year. 34% of our kids are going to homeschool. KPBSD has to take an active role in repairing what they're doing, and we can't keep bailing people out every year, and we can only, so we do it again this year.
Okay, we closed Seward Middle School for you, we're about to, which you asked us to do. We're shifting operations of the pool, like you've asked us to. So I feel like we are doing our part as a school district.
Yeah. And we'll see if that happens, and then we'll sit down and talk. And every year we'll do the same thing until the state problem gets fixed.
And my kids are in school right now.
Oh, my concern is right now. My concern was 10 years ago when we started trying to work on this. This isn't a new problem. 2019, the KPBSD created a consolidation plan because it was crashing. COVID came along, gave a bunch of money to the state, a bunch of money to the borough. It went away. It didn't go away. We just pushed it off. We still have to make those decisions. And we will. And we'll be there to help at whatever level we can afford. But I can assure you that if we don't keep up on keeping the cost manageable, you won't have anybody left to teach. There's two reasons why people are leaving. One of them is schools and opportunities. The other one is costs. Costs have gone up significantly, and the opportunities in the lower 48, along with the lower cost of living down, we no longer have a premium for any of our jobs. Right? I was at the early teacher fairs when there were hundreds of people lined up for Alaska teaching jobs. And we're hiring people from other countries. We've got big problems. We will be there to do what we can afford to do, but a bailout that results in another year of the state saying, hey, they did it again. They paid for everything again. It's not gonna, and 2 years from now, we crash. We will have a new governor. We're all looking forward to that. Hopefully it's someone that understands inflation, constitutional requirements. I personally think that we now have a case if the state doesn't straighten things out. And I'll tell you what that case is. That crossover right there at FY28. So the earlier lawsuits about state adequately funding education, the state was still funding significantly more than the locals were. That's not the case anymore. That crossover is a key issue. And I think that clearly defines in the courtroom that they are inadequately meeting their constitutional requirements. Yes, ma'am.
So just to clarify kind of what I'm hearing, first I do appreciate the conservative approach and thinking long term. I'm a teacher at the school. There's a lot of things that would really benefit from extra funding, but I think thinking long term, it is frustrating to have this conversation every year and to see the state keep kicking the ball down the road. So I appreciate that. That being said, knowing that the current amount budgeted to spend on education far from the cap, and the cap has increased, we understand that. it sounds like you would potentially be open to increasing the amount, though not to the cap. Is that true? That is a possibility, you would be open to funding
What
more?
I've said everywhere publicly is I plan to pass a budget that has 59.07 million in it. And so for anyone that panics about that, that's what we do every year. And the school does their thing, and then we find out what we're getting from Juneau, and then we figure out what we need to supplement from here, and they add things in. The problem with that though is teachers are becoming harder and harder to come by because they've had it. For those of you that are still teaching, thank you. I can't imagine running a family on the doubt as to whether or not you're gonna have a contract for the year until we worked on forward funding for education. It's found to be unconstitutional, and, which would be nice if we knew the state funding a year in advance and we can start doing our local thing. Yes. So you said, I asked you to do this thing and I asked you to do this other thing. I didn't ask anything about pools, and my job is not telling education what to do. That's KPBSD. What I said was, you put a plan out in 2019 because you saw what was coming, and this is 7 years later. And we're in a worse position, so they choose what schools, they decide what they're going to do, and we will be here to support the communities on use of the building. And if they demonstrate that they are putting the money into programs instead of half-empty buildings, there will be more money in a supplemental budget after. It won't be to the cap, but it will be more. You were first?
At the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that the Kenai is losing younger families and gaining older families. I think part of the reason of that could be that we're one of the only boroughs that offer a 300K residential exemption for seniors.
375.
375 now. And so I'm wondering if you'd be open to, or looking into how much extra money we could generate, even if that was lowered to something like 250 or 225.
You tell me the number and I'll tell you what it would save.
Okay.
And we can do a table too. It used to be unlimited. Seniors didn't pay any property tax, I think it was 1985 or something that it went, so there's a state 150 mandatory, and there's the 150 the borough gives, and then they get the residential 75 everybody else does, so it's 375. The cities don't all honor it, so some of the cities are 150 and then the 75. You have to think about who's using various services in that discussion. So tax policy is very flexible. It would be nice if there were a group of seniors that decided that that was a good idea. And there are some folks that talk about that. I wouldn't do it on the general government budget, but it's certainly something that should be considered in the service area budget. They disproportionately use a lot of the service area services. And then what you do is strengthen your hardship. You strengthen your hardship. We shouldn't have senior centers in Kenai Peninsula Borough that loses their homestead property taxes. So if you strengthen the hardship piece, folks that simply can't pay, a lot of seniors are in the best financial position of their lives. I mean, I have a lot of friends that are like, why'd you apply for it? Well, I don't know, I don't feel like you should, right? That's why I have a lot of respect for you, even though you were just late. But for the seniors that can afford, a lot of them would like to participate. We should start having that discussion. Make a big difference. The 4%, 4 to 2% seasonal property tax would make a big difference. Getting the 5% cap would make a difference. We'd be balanced this year with those two changes. So those are things that don't have to come out of your pocket, because a lot's already coming out of your pocket. If you can displace some of your taxable revenue to people that just come up and enjoy the place for a little while, they're not gonna know that it's only 2% in the winter and 4% in the summer and start switching their fishing to December, right? It's just a wise way to look at, seasonal sales taxes, and then if there's an idea that you all have that you want me to analyze, we will analyze it. We like good ideas. What I really don't like is just people shooting down things that they don't understand. And that's like hard to fix on Facebook, but it certainly shouldn't come from policymakers. They should all take the time to understand. Yes, ma'am?
I have a different, oh, is it me?
No, the lady behind you was first.
Oh, you.
I know there, when I first came here, years and years and many years ago, we paid, one of the first things that came out of your check, like in September was $10, I think?
Yeah.
Just, and supposedly that went straight to education, if I'm not. Is that something the borough could do? And would it make a difference? And, at what?
Well, that
I mean,
number
I
would-
think $10 is probably $100 or
Yeah, you'd have to move that decimal point. That's likely a state effort. What I worry about is if the state does that tax, do they just shift the other contributions somewhere else? Like, does it add to education funding, or do they just say, no, here's your same amount? So if you did a head tax for education, and you didn't fix the BSA, you'd still have the same problem. So you'd have to be both.
But is it not something the borough can do?
I suppose the borough could do that. I'm not sure what would be the amount that would make a difference, because funding to the cap adds $1,000 a year to the typical property tax versus not funding to the cap, and doubles your taxes within 9 years, so what would your head tax be to make a difference?
I have no idea.
Well, if you have ideas, I'll run the numbers.
It was an employment tax, it came out of your.
Yeah, it was based on.
$10 a year?
Yeah,
Yeah.
It
It was a paycheck.
Yeah, it was
$10.
taken out of the paycheck.
First one of the year.
First one of the year.
And you're holding up pretty good for being that age.
Maybe 10 years.
Yes, sir. Oh, yes.
My question's different, and it's procedural. Can a service area be funded by something other than property tax?
Not under our current ordinance structure. But that doesn't mean, like, what do you have in mind? By what?
Okay.
A bed tax. I got to think about that. It's not included in our ordinance structure. I don't support bed taxes because we already have one. The per night, per unit, I will tell you that if we did a bed tax, we have to eliminate the per night per unit. We already have bed tax. Which is the reason we killed the other one at introduction, and it has less support now than it did then.
But if it were a service area, that would charge you.
Again, not part of our current ordinance.
But they would vote, the service area would vote. Is that okay?
We have to make some changes on how that works, because it goes on your assessed value. Pardon?
Just wondered if it was in the realm of possibility.
Well, anything is, since it's a tax change, would likely have to go on the ballot. If it went on, I'd have to think if you can isolate that to a service area ballot. The dead tax thing's failed several times now on yeah, it'd be challenging. I appreciate our visitors, I understand the impacts, but I also believe in fairness, and having two bed taxes is not fair to anybody. Yes?
Two questions, not related to education. So we are in the middle of forming the Bear Creek Community Council. So can you speak on, like what kind of influence this council can have with the borough? And, what kind of things we can do for ourselves? Second question related to education though, from an employment standpoint, I've been through this before where, now there's no childcare. And I know that someone here has presented some unique ideas for funding childcare with the borough.
on this side, you know, there's, I don't even know if anyone's taking infants right now, but it's hard to offer a job to someone who wants to grow their family, and then there's no childcare for them. So they will go for two reasons. You know, they'll move somewhere in Alaska where there is childcare and better education, or they'll leave, like you said. So we obviously have a childcare issue. It's been documented statistically. You know, we have a childcare desert. So you've got those two kind of unrelated questions. I wanted to get them out there because, and you don't have to answer them long-winded.
I'm happy to,
Yeah.
well, I mean, you want me to answer it, or do you
I
want me
do want you to answer it.
Yes, no, you want just a yes, no?
We would like it.
We are a second-class borough, we are not getting into the insatiable social services, we will not be doing childcare. That is not what we do. We will help you with,
I don't
forming.
think that it was about getting in the business of childcare. I think you introduced some options for funding.
Yeah, yep, that's an authority we don't have and we don't want. We don't want animal control. We're a second-class borough. So
What does that mean?
a second-class borough means lean and mean. That's what happens on the ballot. You can put it on the ballot, I can tell you what'll happen with it. Same thing that's happened every other time. But there are other creative ways to help with those services. Why don't we talk about them instead of impacting them? How many times have you visited with me about your taxes? It's connected. When you get into the insatiable services, you eventually turn into Anchorage, and we're not Anchorage. And that's not why people live here, and that's not how they vote. And how they vote matters. That's who I represent. And the Eastern Peninsula is, and the Southern Peninsula is a little different politically from the 45,000 in the middle of the peninsula. I mean, it's just reality. I answer to all of you, and if there's something that you want to do that we know is going to fail, we can look at other creative ways to help. But that's just where we live. That's who I represent. What was the first one?
Bear Creek Community Council.
Yes, I'm really thrilled that you're doing that. The primary reason for the Bear Creek Community Council is so that you guys will start talking to each other. Because going to your, what is typically a 10-minute meeting, was unpleasant and clearly a community that is not communicating. But the value it brings is, yeah, when you can agree on things, you can bring them to me, and I'll have a better idea how the community feels. You can still come to me individually for any problem that you have. But I think the Bear Creek community needs to spend some time together. Because people aren't that far apart on things, as kind of what I've seen when they talk things out. Behind you first.
I just have do we not see childcare as an economic development activity? Why is it being framed as a social service when we know that it's directly impacting our local economy and our workforce?
Childcare is a social service. We don't do social services.
Okay.
And you are absolutely 100% that in certain parts of the Kenai Peninsula, there are childcare shortages. When we evaluated, we found excess space in most of the Kenai Peninsula with a problematic area in the Seward area and the Homer area. The Homer area has worked through some solutions on their own that have alleviated the challenge. Let's sit down and talk about how we can do that here without asking taxpayers to pay for it. Because I think there are options, yes.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I have been meeting with individuals in the Soldotna and Kenai area. Recently, worked with 100% Communities to do a provider meet and greet where we invited multiple licensed childcare providers from the Soldotna and Kenai area. And there are a number of challenges and barriers there. There were some providers that had a wait list for infants. However, there was not communication between others, and there was another provider who had some slots for infants, and we were able to help collaborate them. But yes, I know Seward we have our own barriers, but I would disagree that the Central Peninsula does not also have some barriers to access to childcare.
I didn't say everything was perfect. Just open to a grand open Boys and Girls Club childcare that increased childcare substantially in the Central Peninsula, particularly for infants. We looked for creative ways to solve some of those problems, and we found some. And we should do that. I'm not saying we don't have a childcare problem. I'm saying it's not a second-class borough's role, in my view. And you can recall me and like elect some other mayor and change the whole thing, maybe. But I hard time believing it gets better. Being willing to talk these things out and look for other solutions. So invite us, Dana particularly was the one who did most of the legwork on the child care issue. Whatever you wanna talk about and whatever services that you wanna get together on and see how we can solve in our community. Don't mistake in what I'm saying about a second-class borough's role. I'm involved in a million things. I've been on the Boys and Girls Club board for like longer than some of you. Well, maybe not some of you have been alive, but usually it, I'm willing to tackle any of these challenges. Tackling challenges and believing that it's the government's role, in my view, leads to unsustainability, because then the next thing, it just opens the door to a lot of other services that Karen's in Anchorage. I don't want to be Anchorage. I want to live here. Doesn't mean we won't solve those problems. So let's talk about it.
Thank you, Mayor Mitchell.
Yes, sir.
So, in relationship to the whole outcome breaking the group between 17-year-olds in particular, parents with them. I know when I'm going around in Seward, Bear Creek area, there's a lot of homes that are only have occupants on sunny days in the summer. And I know there's a lot of other homes that are doing nightly rentals and so aren't occupied the rest of the time. And, when you have people that come to Seward, do work, and they have a job lined up, and they show up, and they can't find a place to live because so much of our housing stock is tied up in not housing families, that seems to be, part of that whole problem that we have with the 2 to 17-year-olds. Can you speak to what the borough might?
Borough's not gonna do anything. The cities are regulating them, and what they're going to do is chase them out of the city limits to somewhere else. Been living here for 44 years. Yeah, I know you weren't playing. 44 years, and my first few years I had to move out of my housing in the summer. It's not new, we just have a way to record it now because of the platforms, right? It's always been the situation we have. Let's work on having adequate housing.
It seems like it's gotten worse. I mean, I've been in Seward 12 years, and in that time, we've lost a lumberyard, 2 hardware stores, and a plumbing store. All things that I think of kind of as essential to having a vibrant housing community. You know, when you get somebody, you know, like the hospital or a school teacher, they show up and they're ready to work, they're excited to be here, and they leave because they can't find a place to live.
Yep, well, housing is a problem all over the country. It's really a problem in Seward and Palmer. Let's work to get some land available and incentivize builders and make the balance right. It's a very important industry as well to us, and some of you are probably saying we should control that. It's pro-industry, and by golly, he's not willing to deal with these things. I say it's a $50 million industry on the Kenai. We actually have a true 4-legged stool, not just a 3-legged stool on the Kenai. We have a healthy economy, and when we have a housing imbalance, we should fix it. It doesn't mean, it might be that we should kill an industry to do it. Let's work on it. And the cities can always regulate what they wanna regulate about VRBOs. They move into the borough because they don't want that level of regulation.
Half of that's up in Bear Creek.
That's the brook. I haven't heard from a lot of people in Bear Creek that say they wanna control the industry there, but I haven't heard like across the Kenai Peninsula. I haven't heard that there's a scream from the electorate to limit short-term rentals. And is it outright tell people what they can do with the property? I don't know that it is. Particularly if they've been in business. I guess Seward sunsetted new. I'm looking at you, Mayor. Did you sunset new short-term rentals?
I don't believe.
Okay.
We put new restrictions in
Okay.
about who gets, that percentage of houses that are occupied by owners and are rentals and such like that. We've also increased the houses that we have that are being built. So
Yes, you have.
trying really hard. It's pricey.
We're willing to partner on getting land available, willing to partner on utility and road development. We're willing to do the things that might make it easier for people to, be successful in creating additional housing. This time is the first time in my life that interest rates and construction costs did this. So as interest rates increase, I mean, you've been around as long as I have, I think, I'm 64.
We won't talk.
Oh, sorry. Typically, when the other inflation hits, interest rates go down, so housing affordability stays somewhat of a constant. This is really challenging, so made it really slow for the market to respond. Even here in my 44 years, the market has typically responded. They wait around for a shortage and then they'll build a few subdivisions, and then when they saturate the market, they'll wait for another, that tension when you start, it's completely out of balance. I would say responding extremely at this point when it could be a temporary situation. Sometimes time and conditions heal a lot of things, so hopefully we come into a more balance. Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions. If we don't fund all the way to the cap, what happens to the extra money? Also, I've heard that the KPB is over budget and has to spend down our remaining fund balance anyway. So why shouldn't we just use it there?
Those are two great questions. So, wait a minute, what was the first one?
If we don't fund all the way to the cap, what happens to the extra money? That $8 million.
Oh, so that's not how that works, but let me try to explain it. Let's see, what would be the best slide? I know what would be the best slide. This would be. Okay, we'll go through it one more time. So, there's not really an extra money thing. The extra 10 million last year with so FY '26, you can see we came down. I wish that had more room to it. So we're on a glide path right now to get in compliance by FY '29. But you can see what last year's funding to the cap did. And you can see that we'll be, the reason I say 2 years is if you funded to the cap, I wish I had a pointer, that,
It's on the list.
do we have like anything wrong?
Is there something?
Okay, I can climb up here. So, what happened last year is this right here is the funding to the cap. So that ate up pretty large chunk of money from. Well, it was 4.7 million that was what would have been on the curve. We do have to erode that, oh, that's perfect. So, why I say 2 years is if you did this 2 more times, you'd be below the minimum balance, and you're out of compliance that way. It actually, because it escalates, the cap escalates more every year. So the difference last year was $4.7 million. The difference this year on funding to the cap is almost $9 million. So the $8 million shortfall is not related to our funding to the cap. It's related to what their budget has done, the reduction from what the state is paying, and our 2.5% curve. So there's not like money floating around that we wouldn't spend. We're still going to spend it just on normal operations. We would just spend it a lot more rapidly. And then when you increase it, you have to make up for it with more taxes. So, where's my sheets? And I'm not gonna talk about the 9 years doubling your taxes thing because that made the headlines. It's a fact, but I think people would understand if we're on mill rate increases. And that is, we're at 3.75, 3.85 for general government. And if you stayed at funding to the cap, you would immediately have to go to 4.79. And if everything stayed the same, you could possibly maintain at that. So some of you are gonna say, I'd gladly pay 4.79 mils, I'd gladly pay another $1.5 million. That's after a 34% escalation of your property tax. So you're paying a lot more money on your property taxes than you did just a few years ago. But, well, I will tell you, because I like getting questions from kids, did I answer kind of, because yours kind of ended up being combined.
Yeah.
We're not gonna leave the school district hanging. The school district has some work to do. They do have some cost to control. They need to take the time to visit with homeschool families and find out how they can bring part of that market back, even in the homeschool format. Because as you know, 30-something% of our kids, 34% of our kids are homeschooled, and most of them are homeschooled somewhere else. So we lose all of that funding. So we organized the only meeting that's occurred. When I became mayor, we sat down, asked homeschool parents to come and talk to us. And we invited the administration to come join us at that meeting, and they did. There has never been a second meeting. We learned really valuable things from, what would you like to see? Education's different. KPB has to stop trying to deliver a 1960s square peg into a 2026 round hole. It's changed. A lot more career and technical education, a blend. What do parents need, right? So, and I don't even think it's a philosophical difference between the homeschools anymore. My understanding from sitting down and talking to a lot of homeschool parents is they just won't listen to like what it is we need for our particular family. And if you want to bring market share back, you have to improve your product. So I think if you look at the $8 million gap, there's a couple things that I talked about there that actually close that gap. But that gap's, the services are pretty lean by even closing that gap. If you met the needs of those families that have gone away, you could offer additional services that way. Deliver a better outcome and train young people that choose not to go to college to be ready to go to work the day they graduate from high school. I mean, we're not even focusing on those programs. So,
But the thing is here is we're combining, we're having, or high school middle school, right? We're going to. And that drives a lot of families away. Myself included, I don't wanna go to school in that kind of place because it's harder to learn than it already is. And that's just, lack of educators and I get it's a whole budgeting thing. But doing things like that, it won't bring more people back. I know multiple people who are leaving the borough just to get better education.
they're leaving the state.
Yeah, the state.
And it's a struggle all over the country because people are having fewer kids. We're not the only state struggling with that, it's everywhere. So, good luck on leaving the state, but the bottom line is, tell us about McKiskey Junior Senior High when it was full and thriving. Joe, you were a teacher there, my whole staff were teachers. Why are you worried about going to a combined junior senior school that could be, get the specialists you need, hopefully you don't have to do distance for all the higher level courses, and hopefully have additional services available. That's not right now.
Well, but I'm not gonna be in school in 10 years. I'm not gonna be there. I'm gonna be there this year, next year. And I'm a freshman at the high school, but, I'm not gonna be there that long for it to be this thriving thing, you know? So, that doesn't really help me, you know? It doesn't help my peers, my 5th grade brother, that doesn't help them.
It might help your 5th grade brother. We'll see how this final budgeting works out. It may result in additional coursework available while you're there. There's no chance of it happening when you're putting the money into buildings where they have 3 half-full schools. You're taking the cost of a building and some non-teaching staff away, and hopefully adding it to the services you need. And that's the idea. That's been the idea with the other consolidations that have occurred, and the other big 4. How does McKiskey Junior Senior High, and I'm not comparing you for this year, you're amazingly articulate and I appreciate it. Just trying to give you some hope that consolidation can be a very positive thing, delivering the things that are needed instead of a couple of schools I go to, the hallways echo with no one being in the building, and they're just trying to keep it open and pretending it's a community school, but the kids most of the kids in the community are going to school in town. Most. Sterling has like 700 kids, like 600 of them are going to school in town. It's where their parents work. Where the thought of consolidating into a thriving building that has the services kids need to succeed is a much better spend of money than roofs and paint and repairs on a building that only has, in that case, 100 kids in it. You know, I don't know your numbers here.
Sir, but respectfully, the consolidation is a very small part of the problem here in Seward. We are losing positions. We're not consolidating and we're gaining. That's not what's happening. We already have educators teaching multiple levels of the same subject concurrently, just so the kids can get their needs met. At Seward High, kids cannot graduate with their mandated classes in the building.
I know that.
We don't have enough teachers, and they're removing our distance ed people. So they have to take distance ed, but now we don't have any distance ed people. So effectively, if she has to take schoolwork at home, why wouldn't I? Because then I would have a lot more control over her curriculum.
So I'm not pretending to be the KPB student.
No, sir, and I understand that.
I want to be clear on that.
I do understand that, but I have gone to all of these meetings, and I genuinely feel like there's a huge disconnect between your office and the school district and the sites and the teachers. There's huge disconnects between what is actually happening and what affects our children. I have 4 children. I have 3 in the district. 1 is in Connections because he's at AgTech in his senior year with a program that wouldn't have been available to him had he been in the building. He wouldn't have been able to graduate in 3 years like he could through homeschool. So now he's at AgTech, actually getting a running start to graduate. He's gonna get out of high school making $90,000 a year.
Good.
You know, but that wouldn't be an option in building.
So I think it's clear to understand what I do and what they do. So there's not a disconnect as far as I'm concerned. They have to manage funding that's available. And we can only fund so much, but we can't tell them what to do. I would love to. I wish they would ask me to hire a business professional that can actually sit down with different communities and determine creative ways to meet their needs. I would have a lot of suggestions for them on some of these things, but I don't. had some of our folks at some of their meetings, and they've asked them to leave. Because it's not what we do. And it's like, well, they are branches of government, they're actually separate governments. The only difference is that the superintendent is not elected by the people. School board members are. In this case, your assembly members and I am elected by the people. I don't know if it would be stronger or not if that arrangement were different, but what they do with the choices that are available is their job and not mine, and I can't force them to do that. And me adding additional funding may or may not result in the gaps that you feel Seward has. Still not my job. Now, if we're all said and done with our budgeting part, the state does their budgeting part, we find out what the final number is, and they said, you know, for this amount of money, we can put this thing back in, and it's really important to the students of the KPBSD, then we will consider it. And if it builds a solid case, we'll support it. But that has not been the way that it's worked.
And I hear you, I do, but I'm asking you to hear me. We're getting rid of our library personnel. You were instrumental in the Alaska redone. We're not gonna have a librarian. I mean, that's the complete opposite of what you worked for to create here. When our children don't have access to books because we don't have a staff position. And I'm sitting here and I'm a massage therapist, I'm not a mathematician, but I see that line above the blue box. So it looks to me like there's money. So that's where the disconnect is, where I am beseeching you to really be considerate in what we're facing in this small community. We are gonna continue to lose families. We are gonna continue to lose families to homeschool. We were a homeschooling family. My kids have only been in the public school system for 3 years. And now we're having the conversation about pulling.
So I did hear you.
Thank
Listened
you.
to every word, and I appreciate it, and I gave you some options on going to the school board.
Which I
Their
know.
job, not mine, and saying, hey, Seward needs this thing, and once budgeting is complete, because it's not important that it happens in our budget cycle. It's important that it happens. If I put a bunch of money into this budget right now, nothing will change. Now, why I say that? I'm hearing the same thing every year, nothing changes, and things need to change. It doesn't mean you should go without the necessary services you need to be successful.
But we are.
But
we are.
And
Well,
we have been.
then lean on the KPBSD on what's
We do.
important to you.
We do, and they don't hear us. And that's why we're frustrated. That's why we're asking you. Because you are our elected representative. And we're asking you to represent us to the school district because they're not listening to us.
How does
The
that
money
work,
is not
Joe?
being spent equitably
You can propose the budget.
in the district.
Yeah, no, that's not what she's saying. As far as I'm concerned, that's not what I'm hearing. Joe, do we try to help? And what happens when we try to help?
We made a little resistance.
We would love to help. We'd love to help.
Okay, could we talk about Boys and Girls Club?
Sure.
Because here's another example of the inequities within the borough. Boys and Girls Club in Seward only provides services through 5th grade. At 6th grade, the kids have to go to TYC, which is run by the city. It's open door. So if I drop off my 6th grader at TYC, I have no guarantee that they're gonna stay there, because they're allowed to come and go as they want. That's not how it is on the other side of the peninsula. Our Boys and Girls Club doesn't have a kitchen.
Oh, you're talking about actual Boys and Girls, a
Actual
private
Boys and Girls Club.
entity? Yeah,
In
no, that
Seward.
would be me wearing a different hat. You can call me tomorrow if you wanna talk about Boys and Girls Club. This is a borough meeting. So my phone number
I
is
have it.
398, my personal cell is 398-6759, and I can connect you with the Boys and Girls Club to talk about things you'd like to see happen with them. if that's what you're asking.
I'm trying to demonstrate that there's a serious lack of equity in the borough across many different departments that all trickle down to our children in Seward not getting what they need and what they deserve. And I'm very frustrated that it is being framed that because I didn't have 7 children, I only had 2, we're not gonna give them the same opportunities that the generations above them got. We need to readjust. Instead of looking at the dollars, we need to say, these are the things that kids need. They need math, they need reading, science, social studies, the arts. And then we need to figure out how they're gonna maintain that base. Instead of saying, here's this money, figure out how you're gonna dole it out.
It's not my job, I'm doling it out.
You're my representative,
No, I'm
please
not.
go to the state, you're
Oh, I'm
talking about.
absolutely working with the state legislature every day. We have to fix that. You are absolutely correct. You're mixing a lot of things into what you're asking. So
It's all mixed together in life.
It is not my job to go to the Kenai Peninsula Borough School Board to ask for equity for Seward.
All I hear you saying is that it's not your job to
Oh, no,
advocate for Seward.
unfortunately, everything's my job. I'm involved in way more things than I'm authorized to be involved in. Some people shut me out. And the KPB, let's go to another question. We can talk later. Yes, sir.
Schools, any support from the borough on the school pool? That, I mean, what's your
Yes.
stance?
We are meeting with communities. We have a mayor's, we've had 2 mayor's meetings. Dan, what's your report on that?
So we've met with the mayors, 2 different occasions, have great correspondence with them. They are collaborating with providing data. We've had a very active school board member that's been helpful as well. And now we are kind of breaking out and looking at communities individually. So next week, we'll be participating in a town hall or a working group that the city of Soldotna organized. So I think we're getting closer, but yeah.
There's
still
been some
tough.
challenges on getting real numbers. Mike has been very helpful, and then when we process the borough's numbers and talk to communities and say those numbers aren't right, it's been very frustrating. Your mayor's been at those meetings, and it's across the board, not pointing fingers at KPBSD. I wish they would hire a single business professional to help them work on some of these things. Yes.
I've heard you're in support of helping us maintain it possibly, like pay for maintenance, is that correct? You're open to that, or?
I can, as long as it remains a school building.
Okay.
We do not have recreation authority, but we do have school maintenance authority. So the smoothest way for that to work is an entity contracting with the district for operating the pool or paying the school district for doing what they're doing today. And then that's another gap we'll look at when everything's said and done to see how we might be able to help if there's a remaining gap. But I think it is pretty good. The whole system number is like $1.4 million. It's so manageable.
I have another question on that.
Yes.
And I know this is probably a KPBSD thing, but like, how come certain cities couldn't pay in like, there's 7 of them, right? 7 pools total? What if we each paid like $50,000 and we put it into a kitty and got that number down and then divided the expense from there? Like, how does that work? You know? Cause like, well, I know some cities are offering, like the city of Seward's been remarkable and amazing for this situation for us. Other cities are not getting a positive response. The cities are willing to help out, but not quite to the magnitude we are. So could we all just pay like a fee, like a flat fee of $50,000-$60,000 to the kitty and help everybody out across? Or I don't know how that works.
I don't think that would cover the delta then.
No, but it would help the.
Yeah, you want the borough to continue maintaining the pools.
We do.
So you have to work out something contractually, and they vary. The pools could be a lot more profitable than they are. Some of the pools have done really well, like Skyview. I've been talking to the hospital about possibly sponsoring that pool because they pay it anyway. Then does that make Soldotna's pool less important if Skyview's remain? Soldotna seems to be the least interested. Kenai's very interested, you guys are interested, Homer's very interested. They're looking at a service area, whatever. If you're gonna do a service area, you have to be very careful and make sure you get a really good idea how people feel. Because often people, like the Nilchik, we all have a tendency to live in a bubble if we allow ourselves to be there and we hang out with people that really care about pools and we know it's gonna pass and we knew it was gonna fail. Like 2% off, if Pat failed 70-30. And then once they vote on something like that, then you have this like recorded opposition to funding pools and it becomes more difficult. But there are so many options that could work, and it's not a large dollar amount, and if it remains a school facility, the borough will continue maintaining pools.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And just to, kind of like ask from your opinion, could the, borough help the school district with these business, issues? Could, like, some sort of anti-helper, kind of thing to get in there?
We would love to.
But that's not sometimes it's.
Oh, no, it's something we can do every day. We'd be happy to help.
So I think with
So
our
what
schools, that's kind of what seems like is going on, that the borough the district just doesn't know how to break these contracts down.
They're very proud, very proud. And I think they see it as an invasion, and I frankly think they've protected their numbers through the years when they had additional funding. I don't mean that negatively, they're just survival. But now that things are tighter, I think they're having a hard time moving away from that and into a more, how can we work together to get some of these things done? We're happy to work with them. We don't need to tell people we're working with them. They don't need to like relinquish an ounce of their power. We're happy to help. Schools are our #1 priority. No matter how people wanna frame it, schools have and will always be our #1 priority. You can see the numbers. We'd like to help them to be successful if they'll let us. We're doing the pool thing because I think it's a lot simpler than they think it is. It's pretty simple. We can figure, I mean, a British thermal unit is literally a measure of raising, water, heating water, right? I mean, so we know what the gallonage is for each of them. We know how much that would change on their bills. We don't know how much natural gas is gonna increase. And of course, you're on electricity here. We don't know about the space heat, but we're the only entity that just operates a